Welcome to another edition of the Bully Pulpit program. I'm Mark Joseph, and today my guest is Bill Lobdell, the author of Losing My Religion, How I Lost My Faith Reporting on Religion in America and Found Unexpected Peace. Bill, thanks for coming.
Thanks, Mark.
Well, that's quite a mouthful.
Yeah, you got to jam it all in there.
I know. Well, Losing My Religion, well, that's obviously a very provocative title for a country that's very religious. How did you come up with the title, first of all, and give us an overview of what the book is about?
Well, basically, in my mid-20s, I had a horrible set of setbacks. Thought my life was kind of over, and a friend came to me and said, you know what you're missing in your life, Bill, is you're missing religion. You're missing God, specifically. And at the time, he could have said, you're missing crack cocaine. I would have taken it, I was at that point. And so he brought me to a mega church, Mariners Church in Irvine, and I fell in love with the place. I was raised Episcopalian, so I wasn't used to worship songs, real study of the Bible. It was very ritualistic, and people were friendly, and they had cappuccinos, and it's just like, God, that's a cool club to belong to, and I really started to learn about God, and I got put on or pretty much kidnapped on a retreat, a men's retreat. And at the end of that retreat, I raised my hand and became a born-again Christian. And for the next 5-6 years, it was like all studying Christianity, apologetics, just loved every bit of it. My bookshelves changed from mystery novels and biographies to all, Chuck Colson and Philip Yancey books. So that's how it all got started. And I was a journalist at the time, so I started to notice that the mainstream media didn't really treat religion objectively. It was all about homosexuality or abortion or sort of freaks, and I was on the inside of it now, and I saw all these marvelous stories of dramatic turnarounds and tensions, and I thought, God, they're not covering religion very well. Maybe that's my calling from God, is to cover religion. So I was working for a Los Angeles Times affiliated paper, and I started to pray that I'd become a religion writer. And I prayed. I knew you have to keep praying and keep praying. So I prayed for about 5 years, and through what I thought were a miraculous set of circumstances, I became the religion writer at the Times. And that's
and now you're not sure if they're miraculous circumstances.
No, I think it was something else. But so I got the job, and for the first couple of years, it was just a dream job. I got to talk to anybody in the nation. I got to travel all around. I covered the Pope John Paul II. I just went everywhere. It's just wonderful. And when you pick up the phone at the time, when you're at Los Angeles Times, it was a really big deal. So they would take your calls, and so I got to basically live my passion 24 hours a day. Except maybe when I'm not sleeping, I didn't. But then I started to notice some problems, and I started to cover the Catholic sex scandal. I covered that full time, basically for 5 years, and I talked to hundreds of victims, their parents, their families, and learned just how their souls were really murdered. I mean, they're just never going to be the same for what happened to them. And you don't really, and I didn't know this until I actually started talking to them. And once you talk to one or two of them, you can't get them out of your head. I mean, it's the worst thing that can happen to somebody. And so I talked to them, and then I talked to the church attorneys and the bishops and the church hierarchy, and they would just lie straight to my face in their documents, just right there. They have no problem with it. And I had gone I was at Mariners, and I really wanted a little more depth to my faith. And I was really drawn to Catholicism because of its long history and its great literature and the saints and everything. So I started to go through these conversion classes. And so during the day, I'd report on the sex scandal, and at night I was learning to become a Catholic. And for a long time, my mind didn't think there was a problem with it. It was like, okay, this is sort of a corrupt hierarchy over here, but that's not really the church, and the church is the people, and the church's relationship with God. So I kept going. And finally on Good Friday, right before you go into the Catholic Church, I pulled back after a year, and I just said, I can't do this. And it was tough. The reason why, it's kind of a funny story, the reason why I pulled out at the very end is I had lost faith in the hierarchy, but I hadn't lost faith in the people. And I'd covered a story where this guy was going to be kicked out of ministry because he'd molested in his past, which was what they were doing. So I went down and saw them, or saw him give the speech. And he's giving the speech. I'm a father of 4 boys. I was just enraged that this guy would have been in ministry for so long, even though he's a admitted child molester. So he leaves the pulpit. The whole congregation gives him a standing ovation with tears in their eyes. And I was just like, what are they doing? You know, this is a pedophile. And then afterwards, they had a listening session. And for the first 5 minutes, they're talking about naming the parish hall after him, an admitted child molester. I thought, man, this church is way more screwed up than I thought. And so I backed off at that point. And that was the start of my losing my faith.
And then you left the LA Times somewhere around that time?
No, actually, I kept going on, because what happened in my mind is, looking back, I always thought faith was a choice. You know, go to the supermarket, I want a green apple, red apple, I want Jesus, or I want Allah, or I want, whoever, or nobody. Your choice. But what I found out is, for me, my faith was like a light switch. It was like on, very bright and everything else. And then one day, and this is only in retrospect, I can look back, but one day it was just out. And I thought I was going through a dry spell, I was in the desert, all those things. And so I started to, from that point on, I really started to reach out, pray more, meet with my prayer group. I started to research things about Christianity in a different way than I did before. Before I wanted to shore up my belief. Now I wanted to make sure my belief was correct. So I started to look at all these studies. Is there any difference between Christian behavior and morals and atheist behavior? And in fact, there's very little. And in fact, some of the atheist behavior, like racism and marriage, is worse than, or divorce is worse than atheists. Started to look at prayer. Did that work? I couldn't find a study that showed that prayer had worked. So I was grasping these straws, trying to hold on to my faith, and I was looking for courageous pastors out there in the mainstream. I did a story on a big investigative series on Trinity Broadcasting Network, and there were many pastors, mainstream pastors like Billy Graham and Robert Schuller, that are on there, give it sort of a tacit endorsement, but they know that the prosperity gospel is a bunch of BS, and they know how they're taking advantage of poor people, but no one speaks up because they want to be on TBN. And I just found it incredibly disappointing.
So during your time at the Times, you started reporting on various people. I think I've seen series on TBN, on even Greg Laurie, the evangelist, and others. Is that how did those stories and finding the underbelly and maybe finding the negative things, how did that affect your personal faith? Or did it affect your faith?
No, it did a lot, because I thought to myself, and I understand that man's sinful and these are men in these institutions and there's going to be sin in there, but I started to think, shouldn't Christian infused organizations act differently than Enron or local government? And for the most part, I found they don't act any differently. There's not like this overwhelming sense of grace and love in these institutions. They're just, the fingerprints of man are all over them. And so I thought, okay, well, maybe it's more about my relationship with God and not being in these institutions. But I just had a hard time, again, finding any evidence of, once I really opened my eyes, finding any evidence that God was out there. And it tortured me. I was frantic to find out. I needed something to grasp and hold on to. And I don't want God to appear before me, but something. And I just didn't see it.
We'll come back in just a moment with our guest, Bill Lobdell, and his book, Losing My Religion. Stay tuned. And we're back with Bill Lobdell, the author of Losing My Religion. So we're talking right now about this period of your life where you're at the times you're reporting. What was the final straw that kind of caused you to give up your faith?
Well, there was a couple of there were two stories that were the final straw. One was I went up to Alaska. There are a series of Eskimo villages in western Alaska, incredibly remote. They have no running water. They just got telephones. There's really no law there. There's no law there. And the Jesuits who run the Catholic parishes up there, they would stick their worst child molesters from around the world into these villages because they were out of the way. There was no way they were going to get caught up there, and they were just, they just were swept up to these villages. And so I went up to St. Michael Island, and I talked to these people in this one village, and for 8 years, an entire generation of boys in that village were raped daily by this Catholic missionary. And that's obviously bad enough. And they kept silent for 30, 40 years, except for one kid. One kid kept telling any bishop, any priest that visited there, hey, this is what happened to us, can you get us help? The suicide rate was astronomical. The alcoholism rate's 100%, even though it's high anyway there. Everybody beat their wives. They were in jail all the time. There was something wrong with these villages, and it wasn't just one village, but these villages. And it was, this trauma, but no one would help. And so finally they filed suit, and the Catholic Church in LA, just to give you an example, they settled their cases for about $1.2 million for each victim of clergy sexual abuse. The initial offer for the Jesuits in Alaska was $10,000. So that's their price they put on a Eskimo's life. And it was to see these people struggle and to know, because of what I've seen, it's not just Catholic people or Catholic hierarchy, but what I've seen in my reporting, I knew that was going to happen. I just said, these guys are not going to be treated right. They're not going to do the right thing. They could have flown these people out of these isolated villages and put them to Anchorage so they can get treatment, because there's no psychologists up there or anything, but they didn't do that. And eventually, because of publicity from my story and other stories, they had to give them a decent settlement. But they don't really care about these people. So that was one. I came back just crushed by that one. And I kept, every time, when you're on the religion beat, I was optimistic each time coming in. I was like, okay, now I'm going to see God's work in action. And not every time, but many times, I was just so disappointed. I was like, oh, I can't believe this is happening. But I was just really naive for a long time. And the last one was actually another Catholic story. Is there was a priest that had, as a seminarian, had fathered a kid. Then his order still accepted him into the priesthood, and they made him take a vow of poverty, so he couldn't provide for the kid, and the order wouldn't provide for the kid because it's not their responsibility, and the priest couldn't do it because he didn't have any money. So the kid's very sick. Mom is living in a basement. She's eating food from second harvest places, and she needed some money, so she took him to court to try to get some child support. He sat up on the stand very smugly and said, I don't know anything. I don't have a salary. I don't have any money. I can't pay. And he had a top-notch Portland lawyer that was paid for by the order. She had nobody but herself, and she hadn't even watched Law and Order, so she didn't know anything about a courtroom. And so for a couple of very painful hours, she tried to get money out of him. The judge finally just said, I can't do it. He doesn't have any money, and this order doesn't want to pay. And I was watching that again, and I thought, yeah, I just knew before it happened exactly how this is going to play out. And it was just so disappointing, and no one would step up and do the right thing. And at that point, I had to admit to myself, for a long time I didn't want to admit that I lost my faith, because my whole world was built around that. That was my whole worldview. And I walked out of there and said, you know what, I gotta admit that this just isn't there anymore. And I was sort of like a kid. I wanted to believe this was true, this sort of fantasy, when I really, the evidence was right in front of me, and I had to admit that what was so.
Mm. And that's the time around about the same time you were leaving the Times as well?
Yeah, well, I left the religion beat because, I still stay at the Times, but I left the religion beat because, not because I couldn't report if I was an atheist, I couldn't report objectively, because I could report objectively when I was a Christian. It was that I was so disgusted by religion. For a long time I thought it was my job Originally, when I was at got the job, I thought my job was to show, put a mirror to religion, show people what an incredible force it is. And then after a while, I thought, well, no, my job is really to expose scandal, to clean up, like St. Francis of Assisi, rebuild my church. My small little way, I was going to help rebuild the church. And then eventually, I just thought that wasn't my calling, and I was just really tired of it. So it was like a cop who'd seen too much on the police beat. So,
were there any folks you met along the way who surprised you, or who you said, boy, this really matches up the real deal, the private and the public matchup?
Yeah, a lot. Not a lot, a few, I should say. I found that the people on the fringes of faith were the ones that truly believed and acted like they believed it.
Fringes meaning what?
Meaning, like, for example, there is a group that in Denver or in Dallas called the Trinity Foundation. Mm-hmm. They live they want to live as close to first century Christians as they can in the way they live. So they live in communal places. They get $10 a week for spending money. They start a school. They take homeless people right off the streets, and it's not in a separate house. They're in their own rooms with the homeless people, trying to get them cleaned up. And they really believe that that's what Jesus required of them. And they're like on the conservative side, and then there's another group called Catholic Worker, which is very, very liberal, but they believe that too. They believe if someone knocks on the door, they're required to take them in. And so these people, you can see the difference in how, the gospel is a very radical document, and you can see the people that radically live that out. And I think the problem with American Christianity is that there's a bunch of people in the middle that say they believe it, but their actions show otherwise, and that's including many pastors. Their behavior and how they spend money and how they act just doesn't match up with what's in the gospel.
What would your recommendations be for cleaning up this sort of underbelly? How would you even start?
Well, I think you need a lot of checks and balances, number one. I think anytime you have a powerful, religion tends to attract charismatic figures, and then they tend to insulate themselves from decision making. So I think you need to make it a more democratic, whatever your organization is, more democratic. But I also think you need to be, we're in a period of time where you have the mega church that really, and it's filtered down to other churches, but it's a real marketing type vehicle, and they're not going to do anything to scare people off. I have a story in there that about hell, and it's just not preached anymore. It's in the Bible. It's right there. Jesus talked about it, a fair amount, but pastors are afraid to talk about it because they don't want to drive off the congregation. So they'd rather talk about, how you can be a better person, or how you can, your finances will be better if you do this or that. So I think you need these radical teachers, and you're going to drive a lot of people away, but you're going to get a much purer body of Christ. And I think right now it's sort of polluted with people that, it's nice to go to church, you feel good, you can see your friends, but you don't live that way probably the rest of the Sunday afternoon, but it's certainly not during the week.
But how would that have would that kind of message have attracted you when you were in your phase?
It would have. I'm glad where I am, because I think, for me at least, it's the truth. I think that I don't think there's a personal God that looks after me. I was really tortured by the basic questions like, why do bad things happen to good people? And when you stop believing in God, it's just because that's the way the world is. It's nature's a fickle thing, and some kids are going to get brain cancer, and some people are going to get this and that. And it all kind of makes sense. But when I was a Christian, those type of questions would just really gnaw at me. Why does God get the credit for prayers that are answered, but when they're not answered, it's like, oh, it's His will. It's just I would like that job, because you never. All you get is
you get credit for all the good and no blame for the bad.
Right. All you get is love. That airplane that on the Hudson, it's God delivered that miracle, but where was He to shoot the birds out of the engines? Why did they have to even go through that? Forgot your question now.
Well, but there was also when planes go down, that's more of a, well, that was the way it was supposed to be. That was God's will.
Yeah, for me, once I looked at it from that point of view, it seems so ridiculous to me that we set the scenario that God can never be blamed for anything. I mean, if we're going to be honest, there was a plane that just went down in Buffalo today that killed 50 people. It'd be like, you'd be mad at God. Why did you let that happen? Why did, one of the passengers was a widow of someone that died in 9/11. It's like, how can you let that happen? Why don't you get mad? But people aren't. I think it's really fake when they say, you know what, that's God's will. We don't know. He has a bigger plan. That's not what they feel inside. They're pissed off, but they won't show it.
Okay, we'll come back in just a minute with our guest, Bill Lobdell, the author of Losing My Religion, on the Bully Pulpit Show. And welcome back to the Bully Pulpit Show with my guest, Bill Lobdell, talking about his book, Losing My Religion. So, Bill, we've talked a little bit about how you moved from faith to, I don't know what you would call it, non-faith, lack of faith.
Reluctant atheist.
Reluctant atheist. By the way, are you an atheist or an agnostic?
I'm more atheist than an agnostic.
Okay. So how has your theology changed in practical terms? For instance, it's been in the 20th century, we've moved from the idea in Christianity of sort of God has called you to, you're making a decision. Billy Graham has a magazine called The Decision Magazine, where you decide today to, where are you on that scale, for instance? What do you believe now? Do people make decisions to believe and follow God, or is it something that God bestows on the select few?
Well, I don't believe in God, so I would say the
person formerly known as.
Yes. I think that, the biggest change, and when I was an evangelical Christian, I was convinced that, like my brothers and sister, I don't know if they were going to go to hell, but man, their choice was such a bad one because they could be going to hell. And I felt sorry for them, I prayed for them, but now I realize that this just isn't a choice. And so when people say, oh, you're walking away from God, it's like, or why don't you do Pascal's wager, which basically, why don't you just believe in God, because if you're wrong, so what? But if you're right, you're going to get eternity in heaven. And I'm guessing that God can see through that. I'm guessing God can see, I don't really believe in you, but I'm going to do this because of a wager. And so that's how my my philosophy now is it's hard to get over. The hardest thing to get over is the afterlife. I mean, I just don't believe there's an afterlife, and so it makes this. So that takes a long time to sort of. I mean, eternity in heaven is a very nice concept. I think that's why it's invented. But once you sort of get past that, it makes this life much more. Much richer and much more meaningful in that every day you don't have very many days here, and you've got this chance, kind of this fluky chance to be on Earth, and you should do the best you can. So it for me it means a much more, I hate to use this word, but purposeful way to live, because I'm not going to get any of these days back, and I don't have this eternity to look forward to.
So at one point, which one would you have subscribed to, let's say, before, and then what have you moved to on the notion of being chosen versus choosing, for instance?
I would have been more for you choose God, you make that decision.
What about on the notion of sort of eternal security? Because there's a camp that would say to you, listen, nice try, but you can't get away from the guy. You signed up once and you're in. regardless of what you think now.
Right.
Sort of a hyper-Calvinist kind of view. So,
right.
What are your thoughts on that view?
That's funny. That's what if you look at the book cover, there's a little bit of amber left in the blown-out candle. So my evangelical friends say, "Oh, that's you. You're going to rekindle it," and they're very much think I'm going through some multi-year phase, and I'll be back.
This is your midlife religious crisis.
Yes, yes. For me, they don't understand. I mean, I wouldn't have understood back in the day, and they also fall back on, you were born again. You can't be unborn again. I don't buy that. I think that if I'm wrong, which I could be, if I'm wrong, I think, and if God is the God that's described, at least partly in the Bible, as being this just or merciful God. I don't know if just is the right word. I've tried my hardest. I probably tried harder than most people about trying to believe in Him and hold on to Him, and I just couldn't. And so, if there's I don't see a loving God barring me from some sort of eternity or banishing me for eternity to hell because of what I honestly and diligently try to do.
So your hope would be, if you were wrong, let's say, your hope would be that He would say, listen, I knew your heart and you were sincere and you believed and then didn't believe, but you're in anyway. That would be sort of the outside hope if that scenario were true. There's a lot of ifs there.
Yeah, no, that's true. I just don't see how the people that are big critics of my book, they are so sure of themselves, and they're so positive that I'm going to be right to hell. And a lot of them are language, or you idiot, or can't you? They're very loving, but I just don't see it. I know how I am with my kids. We're supposed to be made in God's image. If my kid just struggled and struggled and struggled and just somehow couldn't get it for whatever reason, you're not going to sit there and say, you know what, you should have. You should have felt. It's really a feeling. You should have felt some other way. See ya. It's just not going to happen.
It brings up an interesting point about kids. You've got 4 sons.
Yes.
What are their ages?
20, 17, 12, and 9.
So part of people like religion because of what it does to kids. It socializes them. It keeps them from being whatever drug addicts or whatever. How about the sort of secularized version of religion, where let's get the kids in Sunday school and keep them on the straight and narrow? Mm-hmm. What are the implications, and are you concerned about any implications for your kids that they may not pick up the socialized part of religion?
Right. My 2 oldest ones were raised going to church twice a week. They're no better as people than my younger ones who haven't darkened the door of a church. I think that the youth groups, they would go to these youth groups, and they were great because the girls were there, and they pizza, and they'd get into some mischief from time to time. I don't see it teaching any great moral lessons more than anything else would do. A sports team, I think you learn as much on a sports team as you would basically about how to get along with people and doing what's right, etc. So I'm not worried about the kids. People often ask me, what do I teach my kids? For a long time I kept my beliefs secret. I felt like I wasn't sure about them, and I felt like if I'm going to go to hell, that's one thing, but I want to lead my kids there. And eventually, I sat down with my kids, and especially my older ones, and told them, and they looked at me like kids do and said, well, we knew that. We stopped going to church. We, could hear you talking with, mommy. We knew that. And they're, I would say that I'd say they're all, I want them to be critical thinkers. If they think critically and they can get over the hurdles that I couldn't get over, they want to be Christians or whatever, fine. I don't care. But I just want them to think critically. I think my biggest frustration with people of faith is they don't think critically.
Was any part of this journey, did it have a personal component? I know you went through a divorce. Was that part of any of this? Did it play into it at all? Or was it purely a philosophical?
Well, that's how I got into religion, was because I had a divorce and I got my girlfriend pregnant, and all these things happened that were horrible. I don't think, my second wife, we just celebrated our 20th anniversary. I don't know how we would do if she hadn't gone along this deconversion path along with me. She got there much more quickly because I'd come home and tell her these things, and she, as a mother, would just, her instincts were just to lash out and to, have a lot of anger. And so she got there much more quickly than I did, and with much more force than I did. So it would be hard if she's still going to church a couple times a week.
Now, as far as your new kind of philosophical outlook, it seems to me that the thing about the old structure was at least the priests, what they were doing, sort of broke the rules of the faith, even though that was happening. In your new worldview, on what basis would that behavior be condemned?
Well, I find it, that's a common question people ask me, and I think all of us have an innate sense of right and wrong. Many people say that's God infused. I would say it's 4.5 million years of evolution infused. We know what's good for ourselves. We know what's good for our tribe. And I don't need personally somebody up above telling me that it's wrong to kill somebody or it's wrong to lie to somebody. I just don't have. I don't think I lead any moral life or less moral life. Being an atheist, and I know the atheists that an atheist can be just as bad as Christians in their fundamentalism. The atheists that really get under my skin are they say, you're 48, you spent 20 years believing this nonsense. How does it feel to waste the majority of your adult life on a Santa Claus? They're very sensitive people. Anybody that is so sure of themselves is I'm suspicious of. But I don't think that there's. I just don't think. I think it's insulting to the human race to think that you need somebody over you to sort of make sure you're guided the right way. I think people basically do the right thing.
Okay, we'll come back in just a moment with our guest Bill Lobdell, the author of Losing My Religion. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the Bully Pulpit Show for one last segment with the author of Losing My Religion, a provocative title, and he's not with REM, Bill Lobdell. So Bill, you talked about the tribe, that the tribe generally has an idea of what's right and wrong, but it seems to me the tribe has really radically different views of what's right and wrong, because half the tribe thinks, homosexuality is wrong, the other half thinks it's okay, all kinds of abortion, whatever the issues are. So, there are some issues, I guess, where there's a consensus. We're all pretty much agreed on murder, except for the people who actually commit murders. But how can you say the tribe is agreed when there's so much disagreement within? And that's just the American tribe, let alone every other tribe in the world.
Very good question. I think part of it is that, for example, homosexuality. I think in 50 years' time or 100 years' time, probably the last 50 years, I think that's going to be seen like the civil rights movement. I think
in America.
In America.
But not in Saudi Arabia.
No, but that's religion infused. What I'm trying to get at is I think a lot of the I think you have in religion sort of medieval values or ancient values that that conflict with the modern world. Catholics and birth control. They won't give condoms out in Africa, even though it would save probably millions of lives. But they think that's going to be a sin. So the bigger sin is birth control versus saving these lives. So I think in a lot of these religions, and I think homosexuality falls under it, that it's these ancient values that should have evolved with what we know about human physiology and psychology, blah blah blah, but they don't because of religion. Now abortion, I would say, I don't think anybody in their right mind is for abortion. Right? They think it's a bad thing, but it's just whether you can outlaw it, and I think if everybody on both sides would think if we can get to 0 abortions, that'd be great.
But just in general, I'm just more thinking about the authority of, in other words, what if there isn't a tribal consensus that raping boys in the Alaskan wild is wrong? On what authority would your outrage be based on once you've lost that particular authority?
But I don't think that there is. You'd have to give me an instance where what was the behavior that not in religious terms like Saudi Arabia, but in secular terms, what kind of behavior is condoned that is just so outrageous it would, we couldn't even really just, like raping kids. I'm not sure there is. I see it the other way. I see religion, that women can't show themselves, and if they commit adultery, they're stoned, blah blah blah. I see that being religiously infused as opposed to a secular society.
But so you obviously support the laws that would prevent raping of boys in Alaska.
Right.
But I mean, oftentimes these kinds of laws tend to be religion-based or informed by a religious conscience, right? I mean, do you think we have a secular notion
I don't think
that we shouldn't rape 13-year-old boys?
Yeah, I think that's inherent in just who we are as a people. I don't think my religion taught me that. I think you just go, what, that's not right. Let's not.
But there are clearly groups who support that notion. For instance, NAMBLA. I mean, they're part of the tribe.
Yeah, but they're very far out.
But what if their numbers increase and they're part of the tribe? How would you deal with that in a kind of a secular way?
Well, then I'd be wrong in my. I don't see that happening. I don't see that being a possibility.
We have a mutual friend who's did a documentary called Frisbee, and I've always been torn by which. By the way, Frisbee is about.
It's a great movie. It's
about a young man who, I guess, helped to start the Calvary chapels in various churches. But he was actually at the time gay, and it was, I believe it was covered up for a while, or maybe it wasn't, and then he was eventually kicked out of the church. So, and the whole tone of the documentary is sort of, he shouldn't have been kicked out or should have been more compassionate. But it seems to me with the Catholic Church often not stepping up quickly and dealing with those situations, and then with this one where it seems like what should a church do in situations where, and I believe that he had said that he was involved with young people in the congregation, so it wasn't quite 12-year-olds, but it was some kind of sexual activity that was going on. How should a church deal with those things?
Well, I think you need. I think one of his in the film, one of their big problems was they wrote him out of the history of the Calvary Chapel movement, and so it's like he never. It's like Stalin, rewriting history. I'll give you an example right now. Is Ted Haggart. This guy did so much for so many evangelicals, and he's caught with a male prostitute. Then it comes out that he's paid off another kid who was 18 at the time, but he's so ostracized from his old group that he's according to this HBO special I just watched, he's selling life insurance door to door and barely making it. Now, kicking him out of his leadership position, makes all kinds of sense. Making sure he's not around, young boys, because it had that 18-year-old that's very close to the, limit. That makes sense. But is there no one that can use this guy's skills to give him a decent job so he's not sitting there, just being humiliated, trying to sell life insurance down in Florida? So I don't get that. I don't get. There was a, and I just learned about this, but there was a Catholic bishop who saw this sex scandal 50 years ago, and he bought an island in the Bahamas to send these guys to, because he knew they were repeat, and he wanted to be repeat their crimes, and so he wanted to be kind to them, but he also wanted to make sure no kids got hurt. And his superiors made him sell the island and said, no, we're not going to do that. They're going to look like they're leopards out there. And so they just went right back into society.
So how would you, in your perfect world, see them treated? Let's say there's a priest who's been doing horrible things. I guess you want him in jail for a while at least. But how should the church have dealt with it, or should they deal with it?
Well, what they didn't do, which you say the first thing, is a felony. So out of in the past 50 years, out of something like 5,000 priests that had been accused of raping kids, 2% have spent any time in jail. So the first reaction was never to call the police. So call the police, and then I think I think, and this is where I differ from some of the victims groups, is I think you leave them somehow within the Catholic Church, but you isolate them. You get them to a monastery if they want to do it. There's a guy in the 4th century named Saint Basil, and he said anybody that does this to kids, he had a bunch of different penalties, but after you do all the penalties, they will never be outside their room without an escort. 4th century.
So, and you have menial jobs, like they're taking out the trash, or
yeah,
sweeping.
they could do whatever you do in a monastery, that you can make grapes for wine, or grow grapes, or you could do something. I mean, you could have some sort of positive contribution, but you're isolated. You're not allowed to leave, and you're not a danger to society. But what they do now is they kick them out of ministry, and they're just at large. And there's hundreds of them at large right now.
What's your hope for the book, and what's your hope that readers will take away? I mean, do you hope that people will have deconversions, or that religious people will become more religious, or that they'll question? What is your best scenario outcome for
this book was written from an essay I wrote for the Times, and the vast majority, I got 3,000 emails. It was the most in the Times history over this, and everybody thanked me for honestly talking about faith and doubt. I don't think people are allowed to do that within the confines of their religion. And so I would hope people would, whether they stay in their faith or they don't stay in their faith, they would actually really address their doubts, their faith shortcomings, and their own shortcomings in their whatever their beliefs are. I don't think people do that, and I think we're almost in a, it's almost like we're in a play or something where we're just acting. And I think that's why American Christianity is not as strong as it could be. And I argue that it's probably not as strong as it could be because those people aren't really true believers. But others might just argue that they're not, they need to refortify and re-strengthen themselves. So
it's not proselytizing in the sense that you have an outcome to deconvert. You really want people to question whatever it is they believe.
Yeah, I don't really,
So if somebody reads this and decides to believe, that's part of, you're fine with that.
Who cares? Yeah, I don't. If you talk to me in a couple years, I get so many people trying to reconvert me that it's making me a little more militant. But right now, if they want to do it. My best friend is Hugh Hewitt. He's a big conservative talk show host, evangelical, and we argue about it. We fight about it. He thinks I'm crazy. I think he's crazy. But
and you're still great friends.
We're best friends. Yeah.
Thank you, Bill.
Thanks, Mark.
For coming. And thank you for joining us on the Bully Pulpit program. We'll be back next time with another edition. We'll see you then.